Welcome everyone to the last session of the day, innovation versus regulation, or regulation versus innovation. My name is Will Rode. I'm going to be your moderator today. I'm the Global Head of Capital Markets Research at the Boston Consulting Group. I can't believe we're at SefconV. It's just amazing. The time has flown by. Joining me for the discussion today, Joe Sarcona, Head of Credit and Rates E-Distribution at Morgan Stanley. Next to him, Suparna Vedbrat, Managing Director E-Trading and Market Structure at BlackRock, Yang-Feng Cheng, Head of Interest Rate Swap Trading at Citadel, and at the end, Scott Fitzpatrick, CEO, Tradition Sef. So I think, when I think about way back when Sefs were introduced, it was actually pretty exciting. You know, the CFTC came up with this new idea for a trading venue for trading swaps. There were multiple discussions down in Washington about what these venues would look like, and how it seemed like a quite creative time, and there was talk about the market opening up. And with the introduction of Sefs, we saw all types of firms have to register as Sefs or would be Sef eligible. So in particular, like startup companies actually said this is a new opportunity. But Joe, do you think that the introduction of Sefs has really been an innovative opportunity for the financial services industry?
Well, I think thank you again for having us here. I think to that point, you've had the innovation of Sefs and the Sef landscape has partially leveraged other asset classes as a response, and the regulators have tried to adopt some of the best practices of other markets and apply them to the interest rate swap markets and the credit markets, and then perhaps the FX markets. And those innovations have tried to achieve some of the core principles of Dodd-Frank, which are transparency and price discovery. So I think in that approach, you have the opportunity to do a lot of creative things to a existing marketplace.
Right. Suparna, do you think those creative things have emerged?
So I think, like Joe mentioned, we've actually taken some of the innovation that already exists in other markets, and perhaps just applied them in a different way. So when I think about Sefs, with clearing mandated, you would have naturally seen more standardization of products, and that would have led to electronic trading. So whether we had a Sef mandate or not, you would have started to see some electronic trading. What you've actually added is, a horizontal model relative to what we have in futures, which is, a vertical. And the idea over there was that that would actually help to generate a little bit more product innovation and allow or not allow monopolies of a particular product to form. So from that perspective, I think what we've seen is taking some of the best practices and then just applying them differently in this new market or in the swap market. Even if we think about all the various protocols, like you look at RFQ, central limit order book, we have those in other markets, and they are now being thought through as protocols that we're going to use for trading interest rate swaps.
Yeah. So Yang-Feng, also perhaps you can talk a little bit about you represent Citadel Securities, which is different to Citadel, the buy side firm that we may be better acquainted with, perhaps. But maybe you could tell us a little bit about what is this innovative trend from the perspective of an alternative market maker?
Sure, yeah. Just first to clear some things up, there seems to be a general confusion of Citadel between Citadel Security and then the Citadel hedge fund side. So let me just to clear it up. The swap market making business is under Citadel Security, which is separate from our buy side hedge fund and asset management business. So there are clear walls between these two businesses. There are procedures and information barriers. We are not allowed to share any flow information or basically any information between these two entities. Citadel Security has been a market maker for a number of asset classes globally. So the swap market making group is under the Citadel Security umbrella. It's separate from the hedge fund side.
Okay. So when you talk to making markets, you're talking from the perspective of a sell-side firm. You categorize yourselves as we would otherwise consider all sell-side firms. Is that correct?
Yeah. So Citadel Securities is, as some of you may know, is one of the first new entrants to make markets to end users of interest rate swaps following Dodd-Frank. We are leveraging Citadel Securities leading automated market making platforms, and then so we're able to stream tight prices and firm markets. This is one of the innovations that Suparna mentioned earlier.
Okay, perfect. Scott, what's your take on this?
Well, first of all, I'd maybe question your use of exciting with the introduction of CEFs. Confusing, maybe more so than exciting. But I think, a couple of points that were brought up there by Joe and Suparna on the context around. I think, in all honesty, innovation had already started in these markets. I mean, certainly from our perspective, we had launched a central limit order book in Euro swaps about 3 years ago. We had launched the US dollar interest rate swap central limit order book about 6 or 7 months before the mandate for CEFs and central limit order book trading came in. So I think essentially some of the innovation in terms of market development, and I personally believe that happens outside of the regulatory landscape. I think the regulation, specifically the CFTC regulation, forced the timeline of innovation. And I think what you're seeing now is the dynamic of every single person on this panel and the businesses that they represent. The regulation has, whether you want to call it, maybe provided an opportunity for them to rethink their business model, restructure how they operate, and look again at the services that they're capable of providing and the client base that they're capable of providing those services to.
Okay. Well, before we go into the sort of order book versus RFQ or what protocols, or maybe I could ask Scott, you to continue with your thoughts and say, what do you think is the most innovative thing happening in Cef world now, or what needs to happen over the next couple of years for it to get cooking?
Wow, that's a good question. I mean, I think, well, first of all, let me just make the point that this may be Sefcon 5, and we may have been talking about this for the neck end of 5 years, but the reality is we are 12 months into the Cef landscape and the new regulatory environment. So I think from an innovative perspective, I think everyone's been playing kind of catch-up innovation to make sure that they can be compliant with in the business context that they want to function right now. I think the most innovative thing that's happening right now, I think it's a combination of central limit order books in markets that there weren't necessarily deep, liquid central limit order book markets before, and the technology and functionality around opening those central limit order books up to a multitude of different clients and different access models to that client base. I think that's the innovation right here, right now, I would say, is how you open up your platforms to new entrants.
John?
Well, I think this innovation within CEFs is taken as a microcosm within the greater regulatory change or even market structure change that has happened since the financial crisis. You have, if you take the Cef universe, but that sits in the broader Dodd-Frank universe, which sits in the broader how are banks and the traditional buy-side to sell-side relationships interacting in this new evolving marketplace. And so when we talk about innovation, you have the regulatory driven revolution that's going on. And I often compare it to, my time, I've been at Morgan Stanley 15 years, and over those 15 years involved primarily in listed derivatives on the equity side. And whether it's US listed options or futures or Asian markets, as you've seen the markets evolve by little bits of regulatory encouragement over the past 12 years, in the past 12 months, the revolution that has gone on within the fixed income markets has really led to all of the people in this room having to come up to apply and it was mentioned a minute ago when Scott said, the business models. So with the banks and the traditional liquidity providers now having to deal with different capital regimes, how are the asset managers represented by Superna going to access the markets and continue to do business and invest and hedge in the global marketplace in the most efficient manner possible for all parties involved? And I think that's where you innovate products like MAC coupon swaps or Eris futures, which are very important innovations to help drive the new landscape of trading in these markets.
Superna, so Joe's mentioned a number of hot button topics, business models, technology innovation, perhaps on CEFs. He's mentioned product innovation in terms of standardization. He's also mentioned the possibility of alternative market makers, buy-side firms. Can you talk to some of those themes that he's brought up?
Sure. I think that from the innovation perspective, what's been an interesting piece that I've observed is actually the behavior or the changing behavior of the various market participants. So, whether we look at the changing business models, which for the most part on the sell side, they are not in a position to provide us liquidity in the same form or actually even the same quantity as they could many years ago at the same time. From a buy side perspective, and when you look at my firm, we continue to grow. So how do we fill that gap in liquidity that's being created? We fill that by making ourselves a lot more efficient in how we actually access liquidity. Granted, it's fragmented, so a little bit the onerous of aggregating that liquidity falls on us now, and that's where our technology partners or the trading technologies become very instrumental in being able to make it efficient for us to be able to trade. So, whether we think about some of the incumbent CEFs or a new entrant for us in the trading technology market, and what it brings with them is the IDB space. So through the IDB space, do we actually start to tap into some of the D2D liquidity that traditionally was separate from the D2C liquidity, and how is the market going to allow, from a behavior perspective, that to actually happen? Because we're kind of like a little bit in our own way right now for central limit order books to take off. Mm-hmm. And with both those both the central limit order book, IDB market, as well as the CEFs, it also allows us to perhaps now trade with alternative dealers, whether it's like the Citadels of the world or the electronic market makers, because one thing that Dodd-Frank did bring to the table with trading and clearing is it actually separated your counterparty risk from your execution risk. So we don't have to worry about counterparty risk when we're trading. We have to worry about obviously price and what have you. So it allows us to actually trade with an extended set of counterparties through this whole structure. So everything that Joe mentioned, it actually links into an ecosystem that is very much the part of the way the buy side's going to interact with the market.
Okay, so can I just ask you for a bit more, because you've said that the protocols are not necessarily a determinant of how you want to trade with another firm. You want to leave all your options open, but there has been this discussion around the role of anonymity, and you brought up the central clearing point. What is the relationship then, if any, between protocol and anonymity and the ability to find another market-making firm?
Yeah, so if we think about a limit order book, a central limit order book, those are designed where at time of trade you're trading anonymously, and for us to actually participate in a central limit order book, one of the advantages would be that you are able to information leakage is reduced or is removed completely. So that's one of the advantages. So when we think about like a central limit order book protocol, anonymity becomes central to the discussion. I think that right now, as an industry, we're a little bit gridlocked because there are many that want it to be disclosed, and there are many that don't. And to some extent, I think that perhaps the SEFs or the limit order books should take themselves out of the equation and allow for the participants, the market participants, to determine, do they want to disclose or do they not want to disclose. So then when we think about definitely, if for some reason we are traded anonymously with another buy-side firm, that needs to stay anonymous through and through. There's no reason for us to give up any type of information, right? The same would be, I think, if we think about the smaller, the third tier counterparties that I mentioned earlier, could provide liquidity as and when they choose they want to be in the market, and if it suits us, we would be able to use it. But then when it comes to some of our bigger relationships that provide us valuable services, if they were to say that they want to make sure that they have an understanding of how they are covering us or supporting us, and post-trade, with a delayed time period, if there was a request to disclose some of that information on an aggregate basis, that's not unreasonable. We do that in other markets, and that just basically helps strengthen the services or the relationship you have. But in all cases, you're getting the pricing, at time of trade, it's all anonymous. So, from a pricing perspective, you are maintaining, that transparency of pricing and the fair pricing that everybody would expect on a central limit order book.
Okay, super. Yanfeng, what's your take on this, please?
Yeah, so I think, I'm a big believer of diversity and competition. So, just like there should be, a diverse range of liquidity providers, there should be a diverse range of different, SEFs, and then there should be a diverse range of different execution methods, from fully name gave up RFQ to, fully anonymous central limit order book. And then, so this will provide more choices to the end users. If you believe that by giving up your name, you get a better price, then, these people will use name give up RFQ. And then, if you like the, fully anonymous central limit order book, then, you have an option. I think, natural selection has a good track record for life on Earth, and it should be able to solve this electronification for swaps market.
Okay, Scott, sounds like an ideal world. There's lots of choice and there's lots of competition. So are we seeing liquidity form in the order book, and what's the story?
Yeah, and I think one point I'd like to touch on is that, people talk about central limit order books like there is kind of a one size here, one size here. This is a central limit order book, this is RFQ, and the reality is that the central limit order books that we talk about, which typically are represented by the IDBs in the room, is the reality is this isn't a purely electronic central limit order book environment. They are within those SEFs and the structure of those SEFs in terms of flexibility of execution. There's more to it than the provision of electronic markets and the execution of electronic markets. There is an RFQ methodology. I think part of the innovation, quite frankly, going forward in the relatively short term is you'll see some of the IDBs develop electronic RFQ on the back of the voice RFQ models that they're operating right now. And I think the other thing that people I think that may not necessarily be familiar with central limit order book trading is the way it tends to happen is, a phrase that we coin is you have price discovery on the screen and you have size discovery through a workup process. Now, that, brings a whole conversation around access and how people access central limit order book environments, right? Because we are not at the point yet where they are liquid and deep enough that you can sit there and just trade electronically all day and get done the way you want to get done. In our market today, you may see something trade on the screen in $50 million or $100 million in a 10-year rate, but then at the point that price is discovered, because it's still relatively illiquid in terms of trading on a day-to-day basis, at the point that execution price is discovered, you have a significant workup process on the back of that, where counterparties are involved in the initial transaction get the ability to upsize that trade. And so it's a central limit order book, but it's not a central limit order book in the way that you would talk about an FX marketplace or an equities marketplace. That evolutionary process and the innovation around the flexibility of execution is still to be played out.
And I think that's to Scott's point, it's a yet, right? So if you think about this conversation last year, it was not even contemplated what it would look like a year. It was contemplated, but it wasn't known what was going to look like a year hence. And so all of these issues will get worked out. And if you think about, when we talk about central limit order books, we're talking about a segment of the universe, whether it's in interest rate swaps in particular, a segment of the universe that is 30 plus products, let's say. And out of those 30 plus products, Morgan Stanley, for example, as we analyze these markets, we see that market the volume is happening, 60% of cleared SEF volume in those products is happening in between the interdealer brokers. So that's dealer to dealer predominantly. And of that, 30% is happening on the central limit order books in these 30 so products. That's 30% of a market that was zero last year. That is a huge number to take into account. And with all of the very heated exchanges this morning, you heard some of the back and forth, but this is a very, very new product as far as this industry is concerned or the way people are doing business. So there is absolutely going to be innovative responses that are going to be reactive, and in fact, competition in the market. So the availability of multiple SEFs and multiple clubs is going to help foster this, because competition leads to innovation, and that is one of the core tenets of capitalism.
Do you think folks understand some of the concepts that are being introduced, such as agency execution in fixed income? Suparna, you're shaking your head. You don't think?
I think people don't fully appreciate, what the needs would be. I mean, if somebody is going to offer agency execution, then and you look at what the buy side needs and how these products trade. You actually need agency execution for the package trade too, so all the legs of the package without being subjected to taking basis risk. So what we're seeing, you obviously have two flavors of it. You have the pure agency execution, where you call up your agent and you can leave an order or what have you, or you can have the sponsored agency access too. So I'm talking about the pure agency execution. So there's not a full appreciation right now that when you're offering that service, you actually need it for the more complex pieces, or the ones that haven't yet been been made available on a SEF. So if it's a package trade or what have you. If it's just your pure normal matted swap, there are enough SEFs that you could have connected to that you can just execute it yourself.
What do you call agency, Joe? Is it riskless principal? What is it?
Well, I think there's essentially two flavors of agency execution that's evolving. One is the concept I think that was mentioned, which is going to a provider and asking them to act as your agent to get the best price and follow the rules within the context of that product. And so that is one flavor of it, and we call it on behalf of trading. But that hasn't readily been taken up, and I think one of the panelists mentioned previously in a previous session where it's been used as kind of a backup. And then there's this concept that Suparna mentioned, where liquid products that will tend to trade well electronically, and this is kind of what Scott was talking about, and obviously Yangfeng is going to be market making on these venues. So you have these liquid products that are going to gravitate towards trading electronically. I don't think anybody is under the impression that a 27-year, 4-month, and 3-day swap is ever going to trade well on a central limit order book. But certainly, if you want to pay on 100 million 10 years, that is going to be a point-and-click decision, and you move on. And that gives us the baseline for the innovation that Suparna's talking about as we, and this is Morgan Stanley's approach from an execution side of the business, take into the multiple legs of the trade. So how do we service our clients with large multi-asset class portfolios and address their needs? The SEF piece of it is only one. Then we have to deal with the regulatory regime of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, which has changed or updated its rules on how we have to behave with futures. And then we go into the U.S. Treasury market, which has its own nuances of a bifurcated market. So I think that's when next year this time we're going to be talking about the next level of innovation, or certainly I'll be talking about the next level of innovation in the marketplace in the additional products. How do you take swap futures and how do you combine them against Treasury futures? How do you take the liquid points or the now newly matted curve, and how does that trade on central limit order book? Because somebody is going to come out and mat, I'm sure of it, the new products over the course of the next 12 months. So how does the marketplace then react and drive the trading that way?
No, I agree. So yes, this ability to compare and contrast and to maybe think about how you hedge rate risk over 5 years as opposed to saying I want to do a 5-year interest rate swap is definitely an opportunity. But Scott, like, one of the other elements of agency trading is the sponsored access. You know, you're traditionally a dealer-to-dealer service model, and so agency trading could be providing access to your liquidity pool by virtue of a member that you're used to dealing with. But have you seen this manifest itself, and what do you think? And do you think it will?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is we have seen that, and there are 2 or 3 dealers in particular that are sort of very proactive in supporting that model, and we talk to and connected to all of the above in terms of liquidity provision into those agency models, and yeah, we have seen an introduction of a new clientele, if you like, into our world in the form of papering up. But I wouldn't go as far as to say that we've seen any activity per se, in any great shakes that we're, overly excited about it to happen just yet. But I think that, there's a couple of points that were brought up there that I think are of interest. I mean, we touched briefly there on anonymity, and I think it's something that people are talking about, but there are subtle nuances to those markets. So, for example, we run a central limit order book and we have spread over treasuries on there. A component part of the spread over is the treasury leg, which requires KYC. So unless firms like us who may have a broker-dealer want to put a broker-dealer into the middle of every single trade that may go through in a spread over market for the purpose of serving anonymity, that puts a much, much larger regulatory requirement and capital requirement on us that I'm not sure necessarily some of those SEFs are ready to step up to that place. So anonymity has there's a double-edged sword to that, like there is to everything. I think the other point on the agency side and the introduction of clients through the sort of aggregation model, if you like, is just how the SEF liquidity pool gets represented within those agency models. And I think innovation, quite frankly, a huge part of, we're all in the process of innovation right now, probably more so actually in Joe's world in terms of serving all the clients with the choice of anything up to 24 SEFs. But how you aggregate that liquidity in a way that if you do have a client that wants to come in and do, sweep the stack in, a yard of an interest rate swap product, these guys have got to work out how you best represent the capability to be able to do that, right, on a VWAP basis. And if you're not bringing in enough of the liquidity from the SEFs that are providing that level of liquidity, do you end up spreading that across multiple SEFs? I think that sector of the marketplace, the agency model and sponsored access model, that we are really truly only at the infancy in terms of that the development of that marketplace right now.
Yeah, and I think well, you have to actually see just some basic functionality also be developed. Like when if you talk about like sweeping the book or what have you on a central limit order book, you kind of need average pricing. Without average pricing, it becomes very inefficient, especially if you're used to block and allocating to several accounts on the other side. So some of the CCPs are building out average pricing capabilities, and I think we're going to start to see them make that available in the next couple of months. And I think that's going to play a part in increasing the use of central limit order books, so like places like Tradition, as well as like helping with the adoption of the MAC contract.
Okay.
Or the standardized contract.
Okay, Joe, I'm going to let you speak to average pricing in a minute, but before that, Yangfeng, can I ask, do you make markets in treasuries as well?
So our entity is, is market maker in swaps. So then we have another. So the overall Citadel Securities umbrella has a treasury market making business, and then our swap business is only market making swaps. Because
the reason I ask, because I'm hoping maybe you can give a compare and contrast, because there are order books, primarily in treasuries, and there are RFQ platforms too for treasuries, and these seem to have remained relatively bifurcated, and there seems to be some questions around trade and behavior, or perhaps maybe the buy side gets better prices on the RFQ than it does in the order book, or what would, so do you see, two questions, do you see buy side participation in the order book for treasuries? And if not, why do you think that is the case? Are you able to give some insight there?
I'll try the best I can. So I think one, there's a question of access. Are these order books, central limit order books in Treasury, fully open to all the buy-side firms? I do not know the answer since I'm not a market maker in Treasuries. And then in terms of can buy-side getting a better price in central limit order book compared to RFQ, I think that depends on particular market sector. From a market maker point of view, our goal is to provide liquidity. And it's up to the buy side to decide whatever the trading protocol they want to use. If they want to use RFQ, we're happy to provide liquidity in RFQ. If they want to trade club, then we're happy to be there and then provide liquidity. And then I think there are definitely differences between central limit order book and name and give up RFQ. In the sense that if a firm feels like there will be relationship building, and by giving up the name they can get a better execution, then they will continue to use RFQ, which there will always be an RFQ market, and that there will always be a lot of liquidity that they can access via RFQ. And then if people like to trade anonymously and then slicing orders, average pricing, et cetera, then anonymous club is the way to go. So I think it's definitely a complex question, and then depending on who the end user is, the answer might be different.
Suparna?
I mean, I think on the Treasury side, there's really been no reason for us to change. We get very good pricing. There's a lot going on in the marketplace in general, where because of like all the pressures that we mentioned, changes have to be made. So there's really no reason for us. I think maybe a little bit just making our trade flow a lot more efficient. So we will auto execute, and we will ask for auto execute or auto route some of our treasury flow. But there's really no reason for us to change the protocol from where it is right now.
I mean, with the package trade thing, do you think that might? So, do you think in a way this leads to innovation in, for example, other markets where you have already been comfortable trading in a certain way?
Well, the package trade, like we have to see actually what do the Sefs come up with, right? So, we are hoping and actually expecting them to allow us to trade, all these packages in an integrated manner. So, if it's, if you're trading a swap versus a treasury, you expect to be able to trade that, as a package. And in that case, obviously you would have to follow the protocol that would apply to that particular package. So today, we're using RFQ for swaps. So on central limit order books, if you start to see, the ability to trade those, solving, the KYC treasury issue, which actually, I think we do have a solution if we have to go down that path. then we'll adopt it. But then the trigger there is actually the mandate to trade it, and then the products that are being made available, in all these different venues. But if we just look at, the way things are today, there's really no reason for us to move away from our current trading practice.
We may have just found the link between regulation and innovation, Jay. So you've been very patient. So tell us a little bit about some of the services you're offering and average pricing, or what you think.
So Morgan Stanley takes a holistic approach to its execution services. So we are working with our client base, which is a very diverse client base, to provide them with access to liquid markets around the world from an electronic standpoint. At the same time, we are still a major participant in the capital commitment and risk transfer that our clients are requiring. So we are trying to add this level of service that we're very, very good at in other asset classes, and we're a leader in market share and a stable provider of services to our client base in other asset classes, and adopting them to this new way of trading within a traditional asset class like fixed income. So we're running these side-by-side models within, and so if a client comes in and wants a quick risk transfer on 500 million tens, then they can have that on a risk and capital basis. But as this new market evolves and liquidity starts to deepen, you start to see the correlation and the interplay between these markets. And I think people this morning mentioned October 15th as a good example of an event that happened in the market that is a precursor of potentially some of the pitfalls that are out there if some of the current barriers or limitations within the trading structure aren't addressed. And those include the average pricing of products that should be average price. There's no reason why they shouldn't be at the central clearing party level. The ability for the central limit order books on and some of the CEFs to handle pre-trade allocations that prevent multi-asset class large asset managers who have multiple accounts to be able to then pre-allocate and streamline. People talk a lot about STP. That's a major piece of it. And then we touched on it a bit, but the post-trade name give up and the anonymity that goes upon the evolution. So there's stages that are going to happen over the course of the next 6, 12, 18 months that happen in both the RFQ world and the central limit order book. But also in the RFQ world, it's very, very important to mention that when we get an RFQ, that's a vanilla RFQ at Morgan Stanley, we're providing risk electronically. In many levels, that trade doesn't even hit the attention of a trader.
You don't want it to, presumably.
It's a distraction from the larger trades. So the larger trades, the more complex trades, the trades where human beings are going to always be needed, and I think that there is, if you look at the most electronified market in the world being the U.S. equity markets, there is a very large human component to it. So I think that if you had to predict out, this is going, both these markets, there's enough room, and I think Suparna, I'll give you credit for saying this earlier, this is a hundreds of trillions of dollar market. There's enough room for multiple execution methods, and I think that it's a role of the industry is to streamline those efforts and to stop bickering over which one's going to win, RFQ versus CLOB, how many CLOBs do you have set up, blah, 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 and get on to what makes the process more efficient to deliver to the clients or the end users.
I think Joe has touched on quite a crucial point there. I mean, I think innovation in markets comes in two forms, and I think one has to come before the other. First of all, there's huge technological infrastructure that's required to innovate from a market's perspective, and once that technology is there, then you can see the evolutionary process in actually how markets trade. But you can't revolutionize the trading element of a marketplace without the infrastructure being there in the first place to support it. And pre-trade allocation is a perfect example. In our world is historically wholesale markets and IDB where we never had any of that. We've got to build that technology before we can start to innovate how we actually provide execution services on our platform. So that's a big build out. And I think also, package transactions is one, and then I'll have one other point before I pass on. I think package transactions, there is the capability to execute those in central limit order book. Certainly at Tradition we offer that capability in interest rates. But it comes with a yes but statement, and the yes but statement is there are technological and regulatory issues behind that. Technologically, they are traded as packages, but they're dealt with as individual legs. And from a regulatory perspective, we still have the void ab initio hangover, right, which is there where in a theoretical world where you've got multiple kinds of participants coming in on a SEF, and you could, because of the implied nature of the swaps marketplace, you could have a dealer on two legs and you could have a non-dealer on one leg, and that non-dealer could fail their credit check, and you're left with right now one failed leg and a fly, and the two legs that cleared have to stack, right, which is an imperfect market in my opinion, right? And so there are discussions that for this market to really truly evolve in the context of multiple types of participants and with multiple types of trading styles, there are still little nuances there that need to be resolved. And the final one, I think, is in the context of central limit order book trading, which is clearly very, very different from an RFQ environment, is the allocation of credit and how people manage their risk limit capabilities and where they decide to apply credit for trading purposes. And coming into a central limit order book and making markets across multiple products at one time requires a lot of cooperation. If you're not a self-clearing dealer, it requires a lot of cooperation from your FCM to give you the capability to come in and make markets the way you want to do that.
We've got just a few minutes left before we give the audience an opportunity to ask you guys questions, but perhaps I could ask you, we've talked about products, we've talked about technology, we've talked about behavior change, we've talked about not arguing over protocols, and what do you think, each of you, if you could each answer this question, is the innovation you would like to see occur in this marketplace that will light a fire under the opportunity that you perceive is available because of the introduction of SEFs to swaps? Joe, I'm going to pick on you again first, please.
The innovation I think I would like most to see to encourage SEF trading in this marketplace, which will encourage price transparency and the ease of risk transfer, would be the standardization and deployment of standardized product like MAC coupon swaps with the average price component and the pre-trade allocation and anonymous no-name give up on a central limit order book. I think that will create a very transparent marketplace for the most liquid points on the curve, and will encourage new market participants and market makers to come into the market and feel comfortable transacting.
Perfect. Suparna?
So, I think from a clearing perspective, we thought that there were a lot of benefits that clearing brought to the market. The SEF, it is more of a mandate, and I think that these markets would have naturally moved towards becoming a little bit more electronic over time. So if you just keep in mind, what we know are going to continue to be mandated products, I'd like to see us having an efficient way to trade, any type of package that becomes mandated. And by, efficiently trading, I mean where it's actually traded as an integrated package, where I'm not taking on any type of basis risk between, the various legs, and, then we actually have the benefit of being able to trade electronically. I think, we actually thought there was enough transparency prior to, the introduction of SEFs. So from a pre-trade perspective, there was transparency. I think some of the reporting gives, better transparency of who's in the market and what have you to regulators, which I think, would help them with their oversight. But just purely looking at, pricing in the market, it is maybe marginally better.
Right.
But that wasn't the reason. I think the package trades would be much more, in the innovative camp. And that's actually where the various SEFs and central limit order books have the ability to differentiate themselves.
Okay, so we've got 2 votes for products. Yanfeng?
Yeah, so I think the number one innovation that I would like to see, and I think also it will benefit end users, is something along the line of best execution, in the sense that if there is a best bid in one of the Sefs, that user should somehow always see it and always be able to transact with it. I think this will reduce the complexity of which Sef do I stream to, which Sef do I connect to. Am I getting a good price on RFQ? Am I getting a good price in central limit order book? Because central clearing already took credit risk out of the picture. So now end users should really choose who to transact with based on price, based on liquidity. And I think something along the line of best execution will really help to achieve that.
And when you say you want change in best execution?
So in the sense that if there is a good price in one of the platforms, at least the end user should be able to see it.
But there is a pre-trade transparency rule that says if you ask for 3 dealers for a quote, you fulfilled your best execution mandate. But what you're saying is that firms should be comparing between prices on order books. So is that your suggestion? So
I think firms should always be able to see what's out there for in order books, or what's out there for the firms that they did not choose.
Okay.
So if you choose 3 dealers and then you see the best price of the 3, and then I think the user should always be able to see, hey, what was the best price outside the 3.
Okay, so Perna, I will give you the chance to respond if we don't get any questions from the audience, which is always the baptism of fire in these situations. Scott, your thoughts?
Well, since we're in the business of that innovation and the process of innovating in markets, I think right now, and this might be a kind of strange answer to this question, but the innovation I would like to see is a level playing field. I think what we've got right now is we have 24 different Sefs out there. We've probably got somewhere in the order of 10 to 15 different business models. It's all about interpretation of rules by temporary registered Sefs, and I think that until we've got a level playing field and people can get a sort of true concept of how these central limit order books should operate and what's right, wrong, or indifferent, I think the CFTC as a regulator is at the heart of that, because I think until you've got a clear, clean, enforced, in quotes, set of rules, at the moment it's interpretation that's ruling the market right now, and so in a weird kind of way, the innovation I would like to see is get through the temporary registration process, get everyone fully registered, have a clear operating model, and let's fight from that point on.
I love it. Innovation through regulation. Perfect. Anyone from there? Gentlemen.
Just two quick questions. For Joe, when will algo offerings on Passport become mainstream the way they are in other clubs? And what obstacles are there near term from getting us there? And Passport as an agency model, is it benefiting any particular Sefs over others? And then second question, just for Scott, is Tradition working on anything pre-trade execution-wise with collateral needs and requirements that end users can see?
So thank you for your question. Passport is Morgan Stanley's front-end application. I mean, for all the vendors in the room, is one of Morgan Stanley's portals to execute. For all you vendors in the room, we are vendor agnostic. So the delivery mechanism of the algorithmic trading performance and algos, so to speak, goes to that second stage that I was talking about. So as the products begin to trade more liquid, frankly, we're just in the early days of the end users having access to the central limit order books, and also the uptake of them as MACs start to be listed on them, as average price problems start to resolve themselves, and as pre-trade allocation limitations start to sort out. So we offer a comprehensive suite of algorithms in every other asset class we mentioned, whether it's equities, options, futures, Forex. It is natural that to assist traders like Superna in their execution process, that we're going to deploy an algorithmic execution suite to that platform, and then interplay the asset classes among themselves so we can offer a portfolio of solutions. So thank you for your question, but I think it will be, as the market evolves, on the CEFs. No, I think and I think a panelist mentioned this before, but as the CEFs make themselves more truly electronic trading friendly, and certainly tradition is one of them, you have the ability to access them with ease, and they become much more truly able to handle the client to dealer. Now remember that this was last year, this time they were talking dealer to dealer before the legendary speech here. So it really is the client to central limit order book process to get that smooth. The easier the CEFs make their central limit order books to access, and whether it's by market data provisions or streamlined protocols or their technology just being up to our standards, then the more they'll take up.
As much as I love my fellow WMBAA board members dearly, we compete very aggressively with each other on a day-to-day basis. So I'd like to say that we are working on quite a lot of cool stuff, very innovative stuff, but I'll take that conversation offline with you. Because within 50 feet I can see at least 10 people that would want to know what we're working on. and Nick promises not to take any notes, of course, right?
Any other questions? Okay, great. Look, I think we've had a very long and successful day. So I think it just remains for me to ask you guys to thank my fellow panelists.